There you go. There you go. We should be live on the interwebs.
We are live on YouTube.
Sweet. Well, let's get this show on the road. Where is the go time? Intro. Mm.
Let's do it. It's go time.
Hello, friends, and yeah, guests, co-hosts, compatriots, all that good stuff. So, yeah, this is your friendly neighborhood Go developer and co-host Johnny. It's been a while. I've been missing in action for a little bit, but with the release of Go 121, I thought it was a good time to sort of swing back, by the old farm and see how everybody's doing, and yeah, and invite our good old correspondent, Carl Johnson, to come back and talk to us about what's new, as he usually does for virtually every release of Go since I don't know, the last 4 or 5 or something. I think this is a habit now. Carl, you're now forever the correspondent, the new Go release correspondent.
Yes,
So
I'm
welcome,
here with
Carl.
the. Thank you. I'm here with the breaking news about the new releases, and I get to come back once every 6 months.
Nice, nice. Also joining me for this exclusive, recording is Kris Brandow. How you doing, Kris?
I'm doing all right. Nice day to record. Slightly overcast, but still pretty nice out.
Here too, here too. Yeah, the whole I don't know, forest burning, whatever you call it. That whole smoke thing coming from everywhere. Seems like the world's on fire, honestly. There's always something going on these days. But
Yeah,
hey,
literally on fire these days.
quite literally. But we're not here to talk about sad things. We're here to talk about happy things. Go has a new release, as we do every 6 months in the Go community here. And yeah, we're here to talk about Go 121, which honestly seems like a pretty big deal to me. Like, I went through and read the release notes and I was like, wow, they're like using generics for real now in the standards library. There's like tool improvements, there's language changes, there's new built-ins, there's a whole lot of stuff. So where to start? Carl, what is the most important part of this release for you?
Uh, for me, I would say this is a very generic release.
Here we go.
Uh, Probably in the long term, actually, there'll be other things that are more important in a way because the generic stuff kind of could have been done anytime. But on the other hand, sort of day to day, it does make a difference that the generic stuff has come in. Um, so for people who have been paying attention, right, Go generics were added in Go 1.18, which is now about a
Hmm.
year and a half behind us. So it's
Hmm.
been in there for a little while. When they were working on adding generics to Go, at one point it was sort of planned that they would just release all these generic packages alongside generics, so that all at once it would come out and you could do all these things to your slices and maps and stuff like that. But uh, shortly before the release, there was a decision that, like, whoa, wait a minute, let's try to get some real world experience before we just release some packages to the standard library, because once we add it to the standard library, we're really stuck with it, and we can't
Hmm.
change it anymore because of the Go 1 guarantee. Um,
Hmm.
you can add new functions, but you can't take the old ones out. It's pretty much there permanently. So what they did instead was they released an experimental package. It was at golang.org/x/exp.
Hmm.
And so you could go there and download these generic packages for maps and slices. But finally, with Go 1.21, it's been added to the language officially. So you don't have to go import any third-party packages or download anything. It just comes along with the language automatically, and I find it's very convenient.
Mhm.
Before generics, definitely like day to day, it wasn't like too much trouble. Like you didn't run into it very often. But now that it is there, up where it's really convenient to just look at the slice and see if anything in the slice matches whatever it is I'm searching for,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
not have to write a whole for loop just for this, or like have a utility folder that just has this defined for whatever my type is.
Mhm. Mhm.
So yeah, it makes life a little bit more convenient just to have this stuff built into the language now. So that's definitely
I
something I'm
feel
pretty happy about.
I was very happy, especially about the slices package now leveraging the generic stuff, as we all kind of knew it would eventually, right? But the implementation is smooth. I mean, you're gonna be using the functionality and not even realize you're using generics, which I think for me is the biggest value, right? It's like the language itself, how you write Go is not changing. You're just simply calling a function and it does what's expected and it leverages the capability under the hood, right? So to me, the addition, like slices now is akin to the package now is akin to uh, um, sort of the slicing and dicing I do with the strings package, right? I'm always reaching out for it to do some slicing and dicing, finding things at certain positions and this and that, whatever it is. Now I have fewer loops to write. If I'm trying to find something in a slice, or if I'm trying to compact slice, which actually, I was pleasantly surprised it was a method added to the slices package. You can, yeah, there's notion of compaction, sort of removing duplicate items in there. I think there's a certain some specifics around that, but it's got a lot of utility sort of functions that are in there that are like, yes, this is exactly what I was waiting on, right? For could have they written these things without generics, back in the day or whatever it is? Yes, people just wrote their own sort of utility packages and things to do that, and there were plenty before this, but now I think you're gonna see a reduction for these kinds of utility packages out there, which I think it's a good thing. I think one of the things that we're definitely going to be talking about is the also part of the standard library is the slog, the S log, however you want to pronounce it, sort of a expansion of the log package. Um, the personally, I think, like, I'm happy that it's in there, but my immediate reaction is like, I have to give up log RS. like what am I gonna miss? What am I gonna, like, I had this sort of immediate reaction because I've been using LogRS for quite a while, and other people have their own sort of favorite packages too. There's Zap, there's a few out there that people have gotten used to, but now that there's one in the standard library proper, right? It's like, okay, now, like, I like the fact that I don't have to bring a third party package into my world now, right? Bar none. Like, I absolutely love that, right? But that means it's gonna take, getting to know a new API, a new sort of way of doing things a little bit. The output may not change, but it's you're gonna get to learn how to use some new tooling that perhaps you've sort of been accustomed to using different things. What do you think about the? Obviously, we didn't touch on some of the built-ins. We're going to come back to the built-ins, like the min, max, clear. We're going to come back to those, but I want your opinion on the new logging capability.
Okay, you want to go to logging?
Yes, let's go to logging, and then we can always come back to the other logging. I mean, logging is,
Johnny,
listen,
do you
I'm going to
always
be
eat
using
your
min, max, and
dinner?
I'm one of those people. When I was growing up as a kid, if my mom put like food on a plate and said you're not allowed to eat your meat until you've had your vegetables and things, I've been trying to, now that I'm a grown man, I don't have to do that anymore. I eat my meat first. So this is what we're doing. We're gonna eat this meat first. Let's talk about the logging, and then we're gonna come back to the other stuff.
Okay, we could switch over to Slog. So Slog is a new package. So Go, maybe just for background, has always had a package called Log, right? Very simple logger. It really, I think all it does is timestamp to your logs. I guess it can also add the file, like the file and the line number of where the log was produced. It can but yeah, it's just super basic. It didn't levels, like the only level was fatal. So make a quick CLI where when something goes wrong, you just want to print out an error message. You could do log.fatal, and that would, kill your process and print out happy message. But that's been it. That's been the basic Go logger, and it's definitely it's been simple and usable. But I think a lot of complicated needs, and so there have been a lot of third-party logging packages over the years. So you were saying Logorus or LogRS, Zap. Make up some fake log names for people to Google and not find.
I mean, there's the classic log 15. Can't forget that.
Log 15?
I think that's real.
Oh yeah. It's real. It's real.
Wait, didn't we also port like a famous like Java logging library, Log4j?
Yeah, there's Log4j.
We also Log4j. Yeah. So,
the basic logging has been in there forever, and so recently, I think his name is Jonathan Amsterdam. He goes by JBA on GitHub. He made a proposal to add a new logging package to Go that would be structured logging. So a lot of these very popular logging packages, the way that they work is it's not just like you log and it dumps out a string, but you log and it structures the information into basically keys and values. So like one of the very basic keys is time, and it's time equals whatever, and there's your timestamp. Another is level equals warning, or level equals info, or level equals error. The message, so message equals whatever. But you can also have more complicated logs where you're logging particular things. Like let's say you made a request to some server. You could say server hostname equals hostname equals example.com, and then you could say duration of the request is 37 milliseconds, and you can say this and that. And when you have that structured logging, as an operator who's just like looking at things scroll by in your window, it's it's okay, it's not a big difference, but it's nice to have. But I think when you have like a larger corporation or enterprise, and you're putting all these logs into some sort of a store like Datadog or somebody else, Kibana. Once you have all these logs in a centralized place, if it's structured, then you can search it out, and you can say, okay, show me every request to example.com, get the duration for every request to example.com, give me a histogram of that, show me what the P99 is, let me know when it's going too long and when it's going too short. And it gives you a lot of capabilities that otherwise you wouldn't have. So, people have been using third-party packages for this for a long time. So now that it's come into the standard library, I think it's going to, I think a lot of people are going to stop using third-party packages because they can get their job done with just the Go standard library. One thing that's nice about the design of the way that this has been added is it's not totally encapsulated. So it comes with a log formatter that will format your log lines as JSON. So like, curly brackets and colons and quotation marks and all that normal JSON stuff. But you can also log it as a text format. It's called the log FMT format or something, but it uses equal signs, and it's relatively easy to read, just like with your own eye. But it's pluggable, so you can plug in whatever you want. So if if you're using a particular logging host provider, you can build a sink and say, all right, well, my log provider, they accept logs in this binary format. And so we're going to like automatically, build that binary, and we're going to upload it to whatever server it is. We're going to post it as, a protocol buffer or, whatever. So it's very powerful, very capable. It's like, it's the best of Go, where you have these interfaces that you can extend them pretty easily. And as long as you just implement these, core handful of methods, then, anybody can build on top of it. So yeah, I think if you're in the DevOps world, like this is definitely something that I think is going to change how a lot of people do things. Just in the sense of like now you can plug into this, and people can build adapters so that if you're still into using Loggerus or whatever, you can build a layer where, okay, you call Loggerus and then it calls into the slog package, the structured log package, and then that sends it off to whatever your final destination for your logs is. So it's very powerful. It's very interesting.
It kind of feels like this might become kind of like what the database SQL package is, where it's like, oh, there's this core. We have things like SQLX or SQLC, and then you also have all your drivers and all of that. So it feels like it's building that sort of ecosystem, but for logging.
Yeah, definitely.
So now that we've had my dessert, let's continue. Let's continue on with more standard library stuff, and then we're gonna come back to the core language stuff. So we mentioned like the slices stuff, but the maps also saw some additions, right, for some common operations, also leveraging the new generics capabilities. Like what are some of your favorite new things in the maps package?
Well, to be honest, my favorite thing got cut at the last second. So if you go to the experimental maps package that they had up online before they added it to the standard library, like one of the functions was called maps.keys, and it was just, real stupid,
Right.
simple. You call map.keys and it gives you a slice with all of the keys in the map. And,
Right.
it was definitely something that you could have done before. It wasn't like going to kill you, but it took it from being 3 lines down to 1, and just like one little command, just so much faster and easier to type, map.keys versus like and especially if you have Go imports turned on and it's automatically adding the imports and stuff for you. That's like so much easier to type than just like, okay, 4K : equals range M,
Right.
K keys equals append keys K. It's like, okay, yeah, you can do that. Like,
Right.
you can rattle it off pretty quick, but I'm a very slow
You don't get to
typer,
have
so
that.
I don't,
You don't
I don't
you don't get to have that.
yeah.
You get 5 functions now: clone, copy, delete func, equal, and equal func. That's it.
Right. So keys was dropped at the very last minute because right now they're working on a proposal for the next version of Go to add iterators. So if you're familiar with that from other languages like Python and JavaScript and C# and I'm sure C++ and every other language in the world, it's just the idea that you have like something that returns elements in a list one at a time, or elements in a potentially infinite sequence one at a time.
Right.
And so instead of map.keys returning the slice of all of the elements, all of the keys at once, it would like return one key at a
One
time.
at a time. Right.
And so I think that's
Which is an optimization, right? That you can think of it as an optimization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, like at the last minute, they were like, well, wait a minute, we might add iterators in the next version. So we don't want it to be that map.keys is like the slow version and you have to call map.quick keys or something, or like keys iter or something.
Right.
Yeah. So look forward to that. I'm sure I'll be back in 6 months to tell you that keys is back and I'm celebrating with all of my friends out in the street.
Nice. So the last one I want to touch on the standard library was a CMP or comp, or however you want to call that package. Like I've seen that package before from, I think I've imported, there's a Google Go package called CMP. I've used that before in my tests, actually, to do comparison of different things. But there's a CMP package proper in the standard library now. Like where am I going to use this? Obviously based on a name, it has to do with comparison. Tell me about it.
So the new CMP package, yeah, I think it's definitely related to the Google CMP package in the sense that they're like both doing comparisons. That one was really focusing on like test comparisons, where you're trying to say like, when I run this test, is the value that I get out the same as what I expected, or is it close enough, or is it off in some little ways? And I think it would even like print out like the fine difference of like, okay, on line 37 of this huge object, 2 characters are different, and they would show you exactly what it is. So the new standard library CMP is much, much, much simpler. It's basically, is it 2 or 3 functions? I need to like look it up. But one of the things is cmp.ordered, which is a generic constraint. So generic constraints are just the idea that when you're writing a generic function, you can tell it what kinds of things it can take. So cmp.ordered just means, all right, I can take anything that you can use with a less than operator, right? So strings, numbers, floating point numbers, that's about it, right? But there's a lot of different kinds of numbers. So ints, uints, int32, int64. So all of those now conform to the CMP ordered generic constraint. And then you can do cmp.compare, and that will compare two ordered things to say which of the two is bigger. So there's, I guess, and there's also cmp.less. Okay, so it is 3 things altogether.
It's interesting that the type ordered, like I've seen that before, right? In the now hopefully defunct constraints package. I know you have a pet peeve about that.
I have a pet peeve about that. So yeah, so when the constraints package, so again, going back to the idea that when generics were being worked on, there was one school of thought of like, okay, we're doing generics. Let's just add all this stuff to the standard library and let's go. And that definitely is appealing. But the Go team held off. They're like, okay, let's see how it is in practice. And one of the packages that they worked on experimentally was called constraints. And it just had like a bunch of different generic constraints. So constraints.ordered is the same as the new cmp.ordered. But they also had constraints for other stuff. They were like integer constraints and float constraints and this and that. But after generics came out, I opened an issue on the Go issue tracker and I said, let's just drop the whole idea of constraints, of the constraints package, because basically the only constraint that you end up using is the ordered constraint. And other than that, you don't really use it. So do we need like a whole package just for this? And so that was basically the issue I opened. In the end, they didn't quite do what I said in the issue, because I said to add it to sort, like, so it would be sort.ordered. And instead they made a whole new package, but I still feel vindicated because the constraints package didn't make it in. So my contribution to Go 1.21 was add a new package.
A non-addition, all right.
A non-addition. So yeah, I saved Go from, another, I don't know how many lines of code. That would have been 20 lines of code that they didn't need.
Right. So let's swing back around to some of the built-in stuff. Kris, do you ever wish you had a built-in way to just get the minimum or the maximum of a slice, or any sort of list or something like that built in, as opposed to having to write your own?
I do, but we need to pause for a second to fix some audio issues that we're having.
Oh, okay.
So, Carl, can you try turning down your headphone volume, because we're getting an echo at the moment.
Did that help at all?
Let's see. Johnny, can you talk?
1 2 3 test 1 2 3.
Yeah, I can't. It's a lot more faint now. It's still there, just slightly.
I'm using headphones. Can you talk, Johnny?
1 2 3 test.
Yeah, it's definitely.
1 2
it's
3.
only in my headphones, so I don't know how it's leaking out. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, I can. Let's see if I can talk now. Can I still hear it? I don't think I can hear
I don't hear an echo from you anymore, Kris. For some reason, I was getting an echo from you.
Yeah. I can't. I don't know. I can still slightly hear it, but it's probably okay.
Maybe Jared can let us know if we sound kosher now.
Yeah. Okay, that's right.
Okay. And yeah.
Let me see. Let me hit the mute button,
1
and
2
then
3.
you guys talk and see if you still hear it.
See if it's still there.
Yeah. Testing.
1 2 3 1 2 3.
Yeah, I definitely can't hear an echo anymore.
It's disturbing. How is it echoing? If I do this one, did
You have
that
like a
help at all?
fancy. You have a fancy thing you're plugged into.
Let's see. Can I hear? I cannot.
Can't hear
Don't.
echo.
I don't think I can hear an echo anymore.
That's weird. So it was on the speaker button. It said speaker default external headphones, and then under it said external headphones, and then it says MacBook speakers. And so I just changed it to be external headphones, which is the same as what it says above it, except it doesn't have the word default. But maybe that makes a difference somehow.
Hey, if it
If
works,
it
it
works,
works.
it works. Jeez.
As long as it's good. We did get a report of some glitching on the stream, but I cannot hear it.
Let's see. Let's see.
Do we remember where we were talking about? It was min-max, right?
Yeah, min
Yes,
max.
min-max.
We're going to the max.
Yes. Okay. Well, the echo is gone. I think that's the most important thing.
That's important.
It's so hard to talk when there's an echo. It really just drives you crazy.
I
You just like
know.
anytime you try to start talking, you have to stop.
Okay, Jared's
All right.
checking the stream to see if the glitching is resolved.
Checking the stream. Sitting on the dock of the bay.
Okay. So we're good to go. Okay.
Nice. All right, so let's pick up where we left off. Kris, have you ever wanted a min and a max built in? Go.
I think so. I think there's been a number of times that I've wanted to be able to just be like, give me the smallest thing without having to sort or iterate through a slice myself or a map. But I am personally much more excited for the clear function because I have had to clear lots of maps before, and it's just kind of annoying to have to go through and be like, let me just write a little loop to take care of this. So I'm very excited about that. But I am excited about these min and max functions. I think they will come in handy. Maybe not all of the time, but at least some of the time, which is how I feel about generics in general and about this. Like, I'm very happy with this package in general because I feel like, my worry when generics were first being talked about was they'll be sprayed everywhere. And it seems like we've been very good at being reserved with this and being very judicious with our usage of generics and putting them in the right place and being very careful with how we add them, especially the standard library. So I think it's like little stuff like this just feels very elegant, small little quality of life improvements. You're not getting rid of a ton of code by getting rid of min or max or whatever, but you make go a little bit more concise that way, and I like that quite a bit.
Yeah, with min, max, and clear, for all three of them, part of the motivation is that floating point numbers are the devil's numbers, and they will try to eat you whenever you aren't looking at them. So with a map, you can have a map, and normally your maps, most of the time, the key will be like a string or something string-like, and then you have the values in the map. But you're allowed to have a map from numbers to other things. So you could have a map from ints to whatever, and that makes sense. That's fine too. But the problem comes when you have a map from floats to something else. So that's totally legal in the language. There's nothing stopping you from doing it. But with floating point numbers, there's such a thing as not a number, or nan. So if you do certain operations in floating point, it just it gives up, and instead of returning a number, it returns not a number. I don't think it's if you divide by 0, because I think that returns infinity. But anyway, just if you do the wrong thing with floating point, suddenly it gets mad at you. It returns not a number, and then not a number basically glues up everything else that it touches. So if you have a slice and you want to say, okay, what's the biggest thing in this slice? Well, if you have a nan in there, suddenly the whole thing just becomes moot because the biggest thing is not a number. And then if you have a map, you can have the nan become a key, but then when you go to delete the key, you can't delete it because the nan is not equal to itself. And so then you try to delete it and it gets like stuck and your map is just filling up with more and more not a number numbers. Yeah. So it's like, so basically clear is the only way if for some reason you are using a map from float to something else, you probably shouldn't be doing that, or you should examine your life choices if you're doing that. But if you are doing that, it's possible that these nans will get like stuck in there. And the only way to get them out is with the nuclear built in.
You're making me hungry with all this non-talk. I'm like,
oh yeah,
non.
Let's go to Nando Peri Peri's after this.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's just the little things. So okay, the last thing I want to touch on the built-ins. Well, we had a whole episode recently on Go 121 generics in particular, but maybe we can briefly touch on sort of the changes that had been clarified with the type inference in the spec for as far as the whole generics thing is concerned, right? With the type inference, like, is there like, how can we like briefly summarize that?
I think for the most part, if you're using it, you won't really notice the difference because it should just work. So for the most part, when you use generics in Go, it will do some very light, very mild type inference of like, okay, you've got this input and that, and so I can tell from context that you must want, this to be an int or to be this particular struct or whatever. And so they've just slightly improved it now where it also works for when you have like one generic function is calling another generic function. And so specifically, if you're doing like the slices package with the CMP package, and you're like, okay, I want you to sort this according to this CMP call, it should all just like work automatically and you don't even notice that it's different or better. But if you like took that same code and you brought it back to Go 1.20, it would say, I can't tell what type you mean here. Please add a type annotation. And you'd be like, oh, okay, whatever. So it just saves you a little bit of typing and, physical typing and as well as code. How do you call the other kind of typing? Also mathematical typing. It saves you both kind of typing, but for the most part, you shouldn't notice it. It should just like work and
right.
You don't have to think about it.
Right. The when I saw this in the release notes, I was like, that it's about time, right? So what I'm referring to specifically is if you've ever sort of work with Go routines inside of loops, you probably run in it, especially as a newbie, you probably run into the whole loop variable closure bug, and you're wondering what the heck's going on. But yeah, it seems like there's some initial work around sort of preventing that from being a gotcha for people who don't know how to handle that particular case. Like, I think there's a flag now you can sort of turn on or something.
So the background for this is that this definitely bites everybody at least once, and like I think with some things you get bitten once and then it just never happens again, but with this one it's still like every 6 months or so you get bitten by it again.
You forgot.
But so the way that for loops work in Go is that when you say, for I : equals range, whatever, that I is a new variable and it exists inside of the loop, but not outside of the loop. And it's like, okay, that part is fine. That makes sense. But the problem is it only gets created once per loop. So the whole loop is just reusing the same I every time. And it turns out that this causes bugs when you're like building a closure, or if you take a pointer inside of the loop, you end up taking a pointer to the same thing or closing over the same variable every time. And so you'll do this thing where you'll be like, okay, I'm going to write these functions and I want them all to like, let's say, take one element in a slice and then do something to it. And then you go through and it's like, oh, actually the element in the slice. The last element.
This is crazy. And it's like,
oh, it's because of this bug.
Yeah.
Go has this really
emphasis
on compatibility and like
and make it so that
like if you're writing code today, it'll
working tomorrow,
tomorrow, and you
the language.
language change.
General, they haven't
Wanted
wanted
to change
to change the meaning of
existing things in the code. But
For this example,
example,
like
actually went however many
that
go as
inside of their private repo,
repo.
bunch of public repos. He just like
He got his hands on
as much code
as he could.
if I made it
By default,
it's a
new variable.
every time
You
you
go through the loop,
just once at the top.
break code,
Mhm.
And he couldn't find any
example
like
code
buggy
that would have a new
bug because of
it. I haven't found any
examples of this
creating a
from experience
that not
really creates
bugs
go ahead
and try. Go
All right.
not the default yet.
It's still
Go experiment.
experiment. So if you set the go experiment equals loop var setting, then your program can try it out. And if you run that and you run your test and you're like, oh my god, my test was passing before, but now it's not, then that means that you must have been like the one person in the world who had a bug with this being the other way around. But for everybody else, it should
Okay.
just save you the next time you accidentally run into this particular issue.
And when this finally makes it into whatever version it makes it into, the even the existing codes that redeclares the loop variable inside of the loop won't break. It'll just continue to work as is until you're ready to just remove the new loop variable.
Yeah, it's one of these
Features
where it's getting
the go
go dot
Well.
so,
Say
say
in your
go dot
file that you
want
want
to use
Go.
go and program that
it's relying on the
bug.
how
It
upgrade itself.
Right. And probably GoVet will probably tell you, like, if you're using a version that does support the automatic loop variable declaration, GoVet will probably tell you, like, hey, you don't need to have this extra declaration in your code, which is
yeah,
nice.
there's some way you can run your test. The test itself will like print out something where
This result changes
based
whether
or
or not
not the loop
variable
variable
experiment.
on. And
So you can run
that now and
all of the spots where it's like
Nice.
something with it
turned on
versus not.
I was
Nice,
gonna say
nice.
that if you turn on the loop var thing and your tests fail, it's probably because you were using it within your test. You had some nice little loop for table test, and you just weren't running all the other tests because you didn't know because you weren't passing in the right things. I feel like that's probably more likely than you were actually using this really weird component of Go for something useful.
So let's switch gears to some tooling. It seems like there's a couple things I want to touch on. The PGO is which was introduced in the previous version of Go, now has gone GA. I must admit I haven't had a chance to dive deeper into profile guided optimization. Like, what's the 15-second value prop here for PGO?
So I also haven't used it in production yet. Is that when you run the Go compiler, it's but part of how it's very fast is it's not doing or optimization, sort of giving like everything a quick one. Basically good enough.
optimization. What you do is you build
Your binary, and then you production for a little while.
what's running
In
in
production,
a little thing.
things say, I did
Did
it
a bunch. It would be better
better if this
loop.
uh,
Or it'd be
better
I did it this
this way, or if I move this variable
it's closer.
closer to this.
And so
it'll just
save all of that stuff into
a thing. Take that file and you run the compiler again with that with the profile guided optimization file, and then the second binary it produces will be better optimized. And I forget what they said in the document, but I think they saw like 10% or so better performance.
way. Some people that could be a big difference.
That sounds Yeah, that sounds like a sort of a low effort way of identifying sort of hot paths and things of that nature, and sort of basically, yeah, just not having to sort of do, dive into a profiler and sort of do the typical thing we do with, with pprof and everything else, and trying to figure out where you have too many allocations, et cetera, et cetera. So this is more of a passive way of generating, some insight for you, and you can then at your leisure go and sort of refactor and optimize. Would that be a proper understanding? This is more of a passive approach.
Yeah, I think the main challenge here is just that it needs data to build its profile optimization again. And so this is basically why I've been too lazy to do it, is that probably what you need to do is in your testing environment or something, or if you have like a sophisticated
Canary rollouts.
you might say, okay, we're going to run our canaries on 10%.
And then
They will collect the profile guided, and then we'll build a new release where we use those or something. So it's a little bit tricky in that regard. But I think if you have the infrastructure to get this going, it's basically free money. Here's this way that we can run this, and then all of our stuff is just going to be faster in perpetuity.
once you set up
The DevOps pipeline to make this happen automatically, then
the company just saves,
whatever percentage on CPU for the rest of the time.
Which I imagine if you're running very high scale operations, then any sort of 2 to 7% reduction in resource utilization means many dollars, or whatever your form of currency is. That means a lot of savings there.
I like that it can like just get better over time. If you do integrate it with your whole workflow, just like future releases of Go that get better and better at this, it's like you don't have to do anything extra. It's like, oh, it's already built into my whole workflow, my whole ecosystem, and all of that. So if I upgrade to a new version of Go and there's better optimizations, then I literally don't have to do anything to benefit from those things, which is really cool.
Indeed. So next up, we have in the whole tooling thing, and something I haven't yet played around with. There's forward and backwards compatibility with the Go toolchain. Like, what is that about?
So the go.mod file for some time now has had a line in it, which is the Go version. If you set the Go version, up until now, it hasn't really done. It basically just it tells, this is the version of Go that I was expect. And if you try to use a Go module that has like a future version versus application with, it'll basically just print out a little warning and say, hey, just so you know, this one module expects me to be on Go 1.19. But it was just a warning. It wasn't like a big deal. But now there's new built-in automatically fetch the version of Go that you expect to be built with. So you can specify, I expect to be built with Go 1.21.2. And right now that won't work because 1.21.2 isn't out. But once it is out,
you're living in the future, Carl.
Download it. Maybe this is the version of Go that's like so bulletproof that they never have bug releases for.
perfect on
0.0. But yeah, so it will automatically go online, get that version, download it into a cache spot, and then run that compiler all for you. Now you can turn it off. I think there are people who are going to be in high security environments where it's like, no, we're not going to let something automatically download the newest version.
everything that we run.
Has to be like, tooth comb and blah blah blah. But I think for a lot of people, this is just going to be very, if I have one person on the team and they like release something and on their machine they already
Homebrew upgrade or
apt upgrade or whatever. My machine will just silently update itself to match theirs. So that's pretty.
Very cool. So the next up is so another thing that personally I haven't had use for, but I hear is all the rage in some circles is WebAssembly. So there's an experimental port of WebAssembly system interface, like into Go now, that you can specify, your goose and gorch environment variables to get access to that WASM stuff. Like, how interesting is that for either of you?
Exciting. I've used WASM before, just like to play around with it in the browser, but in the browser, it's always a little bit of a want everything to be as small as possible. And so as soon as you're compiling the whole Go runtime, it's like you start megabyte binary or something like that. And for a system where you're just like cool or something, it's like, oh, 3 MB is not a big deal. But if you're running a website and you want, users to come to the site, and you're like, oh, they've got to download 3 MB before they can load my little, image, that great always. So I think that's always sort of limited the adoption of Go in WebAssembly on the front end. But on the back end,
Who cares? Like the final binary is probably going to be
like 100 megs, but it's like it's trivial on the back end. Exciting for serverless functions, for compute at edge, for things like that, where it's like, okay, now our Go binaries out to the edge super fast, run on every request, and deliver results users in milliseconds or microseconds.
really, really exciting.
Yeah, I think the back end is definitely the more compelling part of this. I also think like this could be used to make like interesting plugin systems and whatnot. Because WebAssembly, like there's so many different runtimes, you can easily embed them into your language. So making it so that Go has this kind of extra layer of access now, where it's not just kind of like, oh, I can't really talk to a file system. I have to depend on the runtime giving me this stuff. Now there's a standard interface that anybody can use. It's really nice, and I'm glad to see that Go is also pushing to get into the WebAssembly space, because I think right now it's a lot of C, C++, Rust, and there's like some other languages floating around. But I've always been like, no, Go should be in there as well. Like Go should be like right up with Rust and C as languages you can use, for these edge computes and for all this other stuff.
There was a really interesting talk at GopherCon, I want to say 2022.
SQL C,
whose name escapes me, but he was talking about using WebAssembly for plugins, and basically, yeah, it was like he wanted to add a plugin system. His Go, SQL compiler, or whatever you want to call it. He wanted a plugin system for that, and
doing it
with WebAssembly, because that was something where it's like, okay, if it's in WebAssembly, I know that the
can't just like
scribble all over my users' hard drives. I can put it into a nice little sandbox, and it can be allowed to, modify the C files, but not, do things that it's not supposed to do. And so I can protect my users. So it could be really interesting to see if, maybe Caddy or, someone could pick this up as a way of having plugins, not necessarily letting the plugins just run any arbitrary code, but only going to run code that you approve of.
Yeah, I think that's Kyle Conroy on GitHub.
That sounds right.
SQLC
yes.
package, yeah.
There's some minor changes I think you're excited about, Carl. You want to touch on those?
Oh, minor changes. I have to promote it because nobody else will promote it, since I was the one who implemented it. So I'm the one who brought funk to Go. I want everybody to know this. So a couple versions back, there's flag.
So flags is the
Go command line flags parsing package. I know a lot of people use other packages, like Cobra or Viper or whatever. But if you want to stick to the standard library, which I recommend, but not every, you can use the flag package. Yep, the flag package has a little helper called funk, and flags.funk. What it'll do is it'll just take whatever command line argument and just pass it to a little
as a string, and
in your function, you can return an error. It's just a very simple and convenient way of
command line.
flag parsing thing. So in Go 1.21, someone in the issues tracker said, "Hey, we should
flags.boolfunc,
which is basically the same as flags.func, except for it works flags that don't necessarily have an argument. So let's say you have, dash verbose or something like that, and you didn't need to have a setting for it. You could just say, dash verbose. Now with Go 1.21, sent off to the func
same way that you could
for something else where it's taking an argument. It was simple. It was like, it's one of those things where there's a lot of stuff.
source.
There's a lot of stuff in the Go issue tracker where it's like, we need somebody to write something, and it's only 3 lines, 5 lines, 20 lines. It's not that much. End up writing,
And the tests are longer
than the thing that you write. I don't know. I see this all the time, like on Reddit and different
open source. Where do I
go? How do I start in open source? And my is always like, you'd be surprised. There's some like really low hanging fruit. And it can be pretty fun to, just implement there. And the team are really understanding. I know for like one of the first things I sent in, can't figure out how to test this. Like, I know what change to make, but I don't.
We're like, okay,
Not a big deal. We'll write the test for you, and
through that, and
it was great. So definitely, if you're looking for something to contribute to, check.
Sweet. Awesome. I think it's time to switch to, some would say, their favorite part of the show, which is unpopular opinions. So,
By some, do you mean you, Johnny?
What? Me? Little old me? I don't know. Let's get the jingle going, shall we?
I actually think you should probably leave.
All right, Carl, I know you brought something spicy. Lay it on
All
us.
right. Here's my spicy take. My spicy take is that is
better
than YAML, because there are situations where XML is appropriate, but there is no situation appropriate.
Damn, shots fired.
So now to defend my
position
and therefore make it so that it becomes a popular opinion. Although maybe not. This one, I don't even defend it enough. Okay, let's talk about XML first. So
reputation.
and the reason it got a really bad reputation is because people were using it for things that it's been used for. So XML, it stands for extensible language. And
if you're using it
as an extensible markup language, it's actually really great. So like, let's say you're working on something and you're like, kind of book, and I need to, annotate all of the verses in the Bible, the chapter headings and stuff. It's like, it's great for that. It's have a document, and you need to have, some things are italicized and some things are in a foreign language, and subtitles, and all that stuff. It's really good. It's not good if it's like, okay, I need to configure this server. It needs to know if this value is true or false. It's like, no, that's bad.
That's not a good use for
XML. But XML does have for which it's appropriate. And I think the fact that now everybody is writing React, and they're writing X, and JSX is basically just inline XML, shows that there are cases where actually XML is pretty good. Now, YAML, on the other hand, I think is never good. There's always something better than YAML. And so we finally made it to Go 1.21, and I'm happy about this. And you know why? Because YAML repeatedly bit me on Go 1.20. Ask me why.
Why?
Well, when you say in
this again
against Go 1.20 that
as Go 1.2.
Uh,
Times.
I had a repo where I'm like, these tests aren't passing. Why are my tests upgrading it to Go 120? And it was I decided that this is Go 1.2. And so
oh
YAML is
snap!
always going to
You
do
just
that to
reminded
you.
me. You just reminded me. I think I had that issue in a GitHub action when I changed a version of a build to 120. I think I had that exact issue. You just because it's the YAML for the GitHub workflows. I ran into that issue. Oh my god! Wow, you
So
are
yeah, my take
absolutely
is
right.
that YAML, I mean, we'll do YAML, but there are better choices. You should use TOML. You can use Q, the thing from
You can use
use, or I guess it's from a lot of people, but he's the guest on
Mhm.
the show who is
you can
Right.
use
lots of things. I like how Caddy does it, where with Caddy, the canonical language that Caddy understands, but they have adapters, right? And so if you want to write YAML, you can, but it'll just take that YAML and turn it into JSON behind the scenes. And then they also have like a specific language, and so you can give it the Caddy language, and then it turns that into JSON behind the scenes. And you can give it an Nginx config, and it'll turn that into JSON behind the scenes. I think that's like that is probably like if you have and time to spare, that's a solution
Right.
for most people. But when the
Mm.
only way to do it is YAML, it's like no, it's just too error prone.
You just have to quote properly. Quote
You just have to
properly.
always quote everything.
Don't quote everything. Make sure you have the right number of tabs and the right number of spaces.
The right number of
just
tabs
don't,
and spaces. Yeah.
indentations. Like if you've ever done Python, you know the life of having the appropriate spacing and things. So yeah, it's
Well, just the
but XML though.
has all these
features that nobody
ever uses, which because they're confusing and hard, and it's like you can include
other documents with references
and stuff, and it's like, oh man, I don't have to understand any of this stuff. And then if you're not careful, it'll be like, oh yeah, the first three things I fed it to understand. One was just like using some, they found on the back of a truck, and it doesn't understand.
Oh man.
It's like,
I feel like with I have
XML sometimes appropriate.
I have equal dislike for YAML. Like there's been a few too many times I'm trying to like configure something in Kubernetes and I'm like, why isn't this working? And it's like, oh, you didn't tab this over enough, or you tab this thing over too much, and I'm like, this is obnoxious. For XML though, I'm a big fan of XML, mostly because you have like namespaces and things in XML, which allows you to actually compose things better. Like if you want that with like JSON, you have to use like JSON LD or something like that. Which makes it a lot more interoperable than other things. I think the main problem with XML is that like it's not quote unquote readable, or people don't like to read it. But I don't think people like to read any of these formats. Like human readability probably shouldn't be the same thing we're trying to achieve with like an efficient machine format, because machines like lots of very detailed information, and humans don't like looking at lots of detailed information. We want like syntax and colors and pretty things to help us parse out information. But yeah, I think as far as your opinion goes, yes, like just dumpster all of YAML. Use XML for more things. I'm like, if you want to configure a server with XML, that's fine, but like provide some useful tools to like present the configuration to humans or things like that. Because yeah, trying to read XML like just a big blob of it is just unfun.
Well, it's just tricky,
I
right?
don't
Like
know, Carl.
JSON. Lucky that they found the primitive types that solve a lot of people. Okay, if you have numbers, you have string, objects, bool. That's all you need usually. I would say the big thing for timestamps or date times. That's like something you run into a whole lot of like, it's almost right, except for it doesn't have the date time. XML is that it's all strings, and it's like, and then you have to add the other layer on top. And so if you're somebody and you're like, oh, I'm going to use XML thing and I need it to be true or false. It's like, okay, in this one, is it that there's an attribute called true, called yes, or is it called on, or is there like a subtag called on and stuff like that? I mean, it's all things that you can work out. And if you have, if you have the schema, if you have the convention of like, okay, in this application, we always do Booleans this way, then it's not a big deal. But it's like you're just trying to generically communicate it from one thing to another, it can be a little bit tricky. And that's where
I feel like the problem, the core
got a bad reputation.
Yeah, I feel like the core problem with JSON is that you have to do everything based on conventions, right? There's no way to say that like you can't change the name from like first name to name or like everything will break, which is like that. But again, like there's JSON LD to help with that. The thing I really don't like about JSON as well is that everything is like a 53-bit floating point number, which is
don't use that 54th bit. That's not for
like,
you.
Some numbers you can't represent, or like the I want this to be Go 1.20, but you're taking this as a number, so you think it's 1.2, and like I really meant that to be a string, and I have to like quote this and whatnot. So it's all a lot of like edges and trade-offs and all of that. But yeah, I don't think anybody has time for YAML like that. That got to go. Like, please stop.
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't know. I don't know, gents.
It lets you have the same key twice and like official allowed, but like discouraged. Or
that's not a.
That's
not
you're
a
just
key.
gonna break everything. Don't do that.
That's a bug.
Yeah, that's a bug. I mean, the Go part,
That's not a key. That's a bug.
I think it like it puts up with it. The Go decoder will
put up with the same key being in there
twice, but
don't do it.
It's just gonna break stuff. And
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Wait, Johnny, are you a fan of YAML? Do you like YAML?
At this point, I've written so much damn CloudFormation and YAML that it's like second nature to me now. I don't mind it. I've come across all the weird ways YAML can break because I write all my CloudFormation YAML by hand. So yeah, I would not trade that in for XML though, or even JSON for that matter.
Do you run it through something like Prettier or something that like config checks, make sure that you didn't like put the spaces in the wrong place or something?
I used to, and then they started behaving weirdly at times, and then I don't have that. I don't have any of those things. I don't have any of those things. I'm like, I'm the computer. I'm like, I'm the computer now. Yeah, I'm like seriously, like the thing. I'm like literally. Like I'm touching YAML every day. I'm touching CloudFormation every day. So now I know all the where all the bodies are buried. So yeah.
I mean, I think that none of these are fun to write by hand, or like JSON XML are definitely not fun to write by hand. YAML is like okay-ish if you do it every day, like you do, Johnny. But I think that's why we have things like Q as well that are up and coming, and people being like, okay, let's try and solve like the writing human writable and readable configuration, and then turn that into other stuff. So perhaps one day in the future, we can replace YAML with something like Q or some other like slightly nicer to use format for the people that want it, and the kind of YAML warriors like yourself, Johnny, can keep on keeping on. I mean, it's like, people write Python all the time and it's fine. So it's like literally white space delimited things are not unusable. It's just, people that don't write it that often might stumble upon stuff, and we should.
Yeah, and there are tools for these people. Like like in my case, in my ecosystem, because I'm doing cloud stuff all the time in AWS. If you want to, you can use the CDK, which will generate YAML for you, and it'll be perfectly syntaxed. YAML. And again, you can have tools that generate the YAML for you if that's not your cup of tea, right? I'm just so used to working with it every day that it doesn't bother me at this point. But yeah, I can totally. I just don't. The XML bit though, Carl, you got. I've scar tissue from XML, man.
Yeah, so you probably saw like when XML was like really, really abusing people.
Bastardized, yeah.
That like I had like people being hurt by XML, but like everybody had switched to JSON.
Yeah, there's a whole. Some of us have battle scars from the good old XSLT days, the old XML and all like variants upon variants of like yeah, I don't want to relive those days. Like I'll take YAML over that nonsense any day. But I mean, granted, there's lots of legacy systems that run and operate on that stuff today, so I can't knock it. It's just not in a modern day. If you're gonna pick, a markup or any sort of configuration language, except unless you like somebody from on high says you can't use any modern techniques or languages, then yeah, stay away from XML, please.
I mean, and maybe this is an unpopular opinion. I think engineers probably shouldn't have to touch these things in their day-to-day anyway. Like, I think part of the problem we have is, especially when it comes to APIs and trying to evolve things, is that, like, HTTP is this wonderful protocol that you can do all this nice content negotiation for, and no one can do it because, like, I don't know, you're like, hey, API, send me back this other thing. It's like, how about JSON? That's all I'm going to send you. Because, like, everybody, you choose one, and then it's like, I'm just going to use this one thing. And I feel like maybe we should just like not like have better abstraction layers on top, like kind of like what Hue does, where it's just like developers and engineers get to touch the nicer things, and then the computers that are talking to each other decide like, oh, I'll send this to you in JSON, I'll send this to you in XML, or I'll send this to you in YAML, and then people don't have to deal with that nastiness, or protobuf, or whatever. So I think like I wasn't heavily doing software development during the good old XML days, but it feels like perhaps part of the problem was that we were operating a little too low in the stack, and we're trying to do too many advanced things without explaining to people what it is we were trying to do, which is, growing pains of an industry.
Yes, indeed. And that is a good place to end the show.
Oh wait, no, I have one more thing.
Ooh,
I have one more thing.
One more thing.
So a number of episodes ago, I had this unpopular opinion that Johnny, you heard something, and I said, oh no, that's what you heard. That's not what I said. And it was about waterfall and the waterfall paper. And I said that the waterfall paper, the development process explained in the waterfall paper is far superior to any of the practices we have today, right? Any of the development process we have today. That was, in fact, an unpopular opinion with our listeners, but I don't think it should be. So I have written a blog post.
I disagree.
And that blog post is now up live on the changelog website. So if you want to go read why I think the waterfall paper contains a very good software development process, and also perhaps improve your own process. Part of the blog post is about things you can take from that paper and a few other papers to make your software development process better, no matter what your process is. Go check out that blog post. I think we can put that in the show notes as well.
All right, the folks who disagreed with Kris, now you have his written rebuttal to your disagreement. He disagrees with your disagreement. Nice.
Don't get a writer angry at you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I know, right? Yeah, you will get back words. Awesome. That's been a great show. Thanks again, Carl, for coming on the show. We'll see you in another 6 months.
All right, see you in 6 months with 1 point stuff cooking in there. I've already merged at least.
Nice.
Oh, I've already got 2 things into the 2 for me to brag about when that comes out. So
nice. And we
keep
look
you guys
forward to
on the
having
edge
you
of your
back.
seat. Months on
What they are.
Nice. Or we can go read the notes. Read the issue tracker.
You can do that too.
The commits, the messages, all that activity.
That's like people who read the book before they watch the movie.
Right? They're like, yeah. Oh, that's not how it went in the book.
Like, what is Carl up to today? Yeah.
Right. Awesome. All right, y'all, and thanks, Kris, for being my co-host. And that is all we have for you, folks.